at it
Mhm.
though. Why don't we shift over for our final thing to talk about? Speaking of female characters, and
Right.
let's talk about the effect the Barbie movie is having on the culture. For those of you watching this and you're not, you're already married, be very thankful that you are not part of the dating or courtship pool anymore because this movie is having a predictably horrifying effect on the minds of young people. TikTok has got this trend going on where they're telling where women are on TikTok are telling young women to test their boyfriends by forcing them to watch the Barbie movie. And if they don't agree with and submit to the politics of that movie, that the relationship is over. So take a look at this. This was shared on social media, and it comes from Reddit, which is like one of the of all the social media sites. It is the most cancerous social media site for a number of reasons, including, of course, the infamous Redditors, but also because if you click on r/all, you are as likely to find like politics you probably disagree with being promoted openly there. R/all meaning or all meaning like you now seeing whatever's just trending, as well as very explicit pornography. So Reddit's a cancerous place. So this I found through I think this was on Twitter, being shared on Twitter, and it's the my girlfriend 22 female watched Barbie movie and said that there are things that I 24 male need to change. She watched it with her female friend first. She told me that she enjoyed it but didn't comment much more about it. Today, she told me that the movie opened her eyes and that we must watch it together this time because there are things that I need to change if we want to keep being a couple. Can a movie really make you question your relationship with a person, especially a Barbie movie? I will watch the movie with her and listen to what she has to say, of course. It just caught me off guard. And the answer to his question is, of course, yes. There have been a few movies throughout history that have really shaken things up. The Barbie movie gets compared to a lot of things, but I actually want to suggest that the Barbie movie is the young woman's Sound of Freedom. It is having that same effect, where Sound of Freedom is causing a lot of people to sort of wake up to this really grotesque social problem and how certain media outlets and big tech platforms and other places are odd, responding in a very odd way to that movie. This movie is having like showing just the state of people. And Missy White is, of course, correct. TikTok is so effective in shaping behavior. Amazing that more do not question who's behind TikTok. Oh, a lot of these other channels are questioning it. The Quartering openly questions it. A lot of these, film commentator channels remind people who's behind TikTok. Um, but yeah, a movie that a lot of conservative channels are trying, like conservative commentators, right up to like Michael Knowles and others are saying that this movie is satire. Now, not purposefully satire, because the filmmaker and her husband, who helps her with all of her projects, are like religiously feminist,
Mhm.
right? Is
Hey,
it that
but she went to Catholic school.
the thing is, people don't Hollywood does not know how to be subtle in a movie anymore, and so what they end up doing is they dump all of their they just put the message out there and they hammer you with it. And the Barbie movie, which I've seen, does hammer you with the message. And what they don't realize is the nature of a satirical film. What makes a satire a satire is that there's no subtlety.
Mhm.
That they just go over the top with whatever trope they're playing off of, and they just keep just in your face with it. It's why like Idiocracy only has like 3 jokes in the whole movie, but they just keep doing them over and over and over again because they're satirizing the state of culture. And that's why
Right.
Idiocracy works so well.
Exactly.
It's why the movie what is it? Hot Shots. You remember that movie with Charlie Sheen? It
Oh yeah.
satirizes the 80s and 90s action movies. And it just does it by just hitting you in the face over and over again with the dumbest elements of those movies. And that's why the first one and the second one work so well, is that they're a satire. The problem is Barbie was made as a serious movie. You would be forgiven for thinking it's a satire because the big speech that America Ferrera gives at the end of the movie is so stupid and cringe inducing that you would think it was satire. But no, the whole movie was meant to be serious. It's just that the people have a religious conviction and dedication to their feminism
Right.
that
So
you
they're
it's
going to find some way to justify it for whatever reason. Yeah, it's definitely it's not a satire. If it's meant to be a satire, it's one of the most poorly executed satires ever.
Mhm.
I think it's absolutely dead serious about live streaming at home. We got the sheep walking by.
the
It's
dulcet
trying
the
to make
dulcet
this.
tones of nature.
Yes. It's trying to make this happen, this third wave feminism, like the thing. And you're right, it is, kind of classic bait and switch. They're doing, oh, a movie for everyone. I got an argument with someone, and they said, well, maybe the movie wasn't made for you. And I love that phrase going around. Sometimes that's
That
fair for certain
that's
types
that's
of
fair
film,
for some things, like,
but
the new Ninja
this
Turtles
was,
movie is clearly not made for me.
yeah, no.
You know?
Miss Marvel was clearly made for 14-year-old teenage Pakistani immigrants, and not for me. And so you get things like that, and that's fine. Fleabag, actually, with it's about the only thing Phoebe Waller-Bridge has ever been in that
Was of quality.
she acted
It
in, is good quality, and it's not made for me, actually.
but
It's
knows whose
made
its
to
audience is
explore,
and does it and
right,
executes it well.
and it does execute it well. Just like big kill 'em action movie might not be something that a thoughtful woman wants to sit down and watch.
Right, but,
It
like,
just it's
but
not made for her.
so here's another example of a good satire. The movie Commando with Arnold in it. You know what he's satirizing? He is making fun of Rambo. The
Yeah.
whole point of that movie was to mock Rambo. So what is Arnold? He's a muscle-bound guy, one-man army who goes after, like, the most stereotypical 80s villain of all time, and, by himself with a
Hmm.
female sidekick who keeps her clothes on, by the way, in the movie. Very
Hmm.
good. If you've never seen this movie, there is one, uh, like, fornication scene in it, and it's when Arnold is beating up one of the mooks, and they're, like, at a hotel, and they literally fly through a wall into the next room, and there's stuff going on in that room. Doesn't need to be there. It's a fair warning, but it's satirizing Rambo, the one man army thing, and it does it masterfully. Whereas the Barbie movie is not intentionally satire; it satirizes itself because Hollywood doesn't know how to be subtle. The Barbie movie would be a much more effective feminist propaganda if they exercised some subtlety in it, but they don't do that. Like if they never actually say the word patriarchy one time,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And if they made it so that the patriarchy that Ken enthrones in Barbie Land when he goes back and takes it over in an afternoon,
Yeah.
which doesn't say much for Barbie Land by itself. If it
Right.
didn't look like just something that most everybody watching was like, hey, that actually looks like a kind of a nice place now.
Mhm.
you
I
know,
know. That's the thing. He almost creates a paradise out of what was
right?
supposed to be a paradise, but was horrible. Actually,
Was a dystopia? It was a
the
dystopia,
funniest part for me though is when they're in the real world and somebody asks Ken for the time,
and it
and
just
now
makes
all of
it
a
makes his
sudden
day.
it makes it say all of a sudden it's like somebody treated me like a human being. I'm like, if anything, that's the oppressed class, right? What the Barbie actually reminded me of is an actual satire by the Greek dramatist Aeschylus. No, I'm sorry, Aristophanes.
Mhm.
And Aristophanes writes this satire. It's called Ecclesiastosein, Assembly Women. And what happens is the women take over Athens, and they
So
do
he
it by
predicted
dressing
feminism
like men.
2,000 years before it happened.
Yes, he did. You see, they dress like men, and they actually, the opening scene is really funny. The ringleader, who's actually the wife of one of the councilmen, she's trying to teach all the women how to talk like men, and then they would go in a thing and then swear by the goddesses. No, you can't swear by a goddess because only women swear by the goddesses. You need to swear by one of these gods. And they're like, oh. And then finally she says, all right, you just let me do the talking. None of you talk. So then it goes to the councilman waking up and like, hey, I can't find my boots. I was going to go to the council because you get paid for showing up. And then in all the other men in the street, hey, I got up, but my wife's not here. I can't find my boots. What's going on? I can't
Mhm.
find my cloak. And then the news comes and they report to him that the women that they elect, the council already happened. They're like, oh, we missed it. And they're like, yeah, and they voted to give the government of the city to the women. Who would have thought? They're all surprised by this. And then there's a lot of body humor, double entendres, and this particular player Aristophanes is famous for that. And basically what happens is the women create this communist society. Everything's got to be nice, everything's got to be fair. So if you're a young man and you want to have after hours activities with a young lady, well, you have to go to the old ones first. And because it's got to be fair. And then you've got a bunch of fun jokes about laying down in the urn, laying down in the grave, and it's like, yeah, this is bad, but it's actually funny. It shows what happens, and you get a passion induced thing where private property is abolished. Just communism basically is what gets created. And so it's supposed to be a cautionary tale of what happens when you let the women get in charge,
And
from
And this
2,500 years ago or whatever.
and this brings me back, right? Can a movie or any pop culture item in general have this effect on people? Absolutely. Absolutely, it can. This is
Right.
one of the reasons why you have to be discerning about the pop culture you consume. You know, I've had people like yell at me before. How can you say you're not against any particular genre of music? Right? I mean, there are just some genres that are bad. I'm like, no, not necessarily. You just got to be
Mhm.
discerning. I can point to you in any genre you claim that is good, and to point to you cancerous stuff in it. My
Mhm.
favorite to do this with is country. Modern country
Mhm.
music is almost porno pop.
So bad.
It's horrible, but if you go back to like the 60s and before, it wasn't actually bad. And some of
Mhm.
it actually, I'm not a fan of country music, but I do like Johnny
Yeah.
Cash, right?
I
And
really
even
don't
though
like
like as
rap.
a person at the time
Um,
he was awful, but
right. Yeah, I'm kidding. I really don't like rap. But I tell the joke that picking music's like picking candy. The first thing you do is throw out the wrapper. Um, there's a there was a
but
sound effect for that.
the point is you got to be discerning because
I
pop
do
culture can
because
have this effect on people.
some rap, and most, I mean, in that genre, most of the stuff is cancerous. It's glorifying drugs and crime and fornication or rape even, and and that stuff that is cancerous. I don't want anything to do with that. But then, there is a fellow who actually is a friend of mine, Enoch. Um,
Mhm.
he's making, Catholic rap. Now, again, I don't care for the genre myself,
Yeah, it's not my
but I'm
kind of
not going to
music,
sit
but
there and tell you that, the thing that on its own anyway doesn't contain blasphemy and it doesn't contain glorification of sin and vice and wicked things. And if you like that genre, then that's the kind of thing you should be listening to. Even though, again, it's not for me. I'm a classical music guy, but there's stuff in classical music that is not good, right? Especially
yeah,
in later stuff, and it's very dissonant. Very some of it is just lame. Some of it's like the musical notes they do create really bad effects, and then the composer like Schoenberg comes to mind. This massive dissonance in the notes, and there's people who are versed in music theory could explain that. I can't really explain that, but I know that it does not have a good effect.
it's like the
So
dubstep of hip hop, basically,
yeah.
or not of hip hop, the dubstep of classical
Mhm.
music. But
Right.
and a movie like this that has this effect on people because they rope you in with the popular, like its pre-existing status in pop culture. Barbie is a cultural icon.
Mhm.
It's one of those, like, do you remember a few years ago when Hostess almost went out of business? When the
Yes.
Twinkies were all of a sudden people were hoarding them because they were going to be gone forever.
Yes.
Somebody ended up buying Hostess, and now you can just buy your prepackaged diabetes and that they
Right.
sold, plus with some new versions, right? It's the same kind of thing. Barbie is part of the culture, and there's a people have an attachment to it that makes them particularly susceptible. And this is not a well done piece of propaganda, but for whatever reason, there's another thing in our culture that was of a similar stature that they tried to turn it into a vehicle for propaganda, and they destroyed the brand, and that was Star Wars.
Mhm.
What happened to Star Wars or Star Trek? Because I know you're more of a Trek guy. What happened to Star Wars and Star Trek when they turned them into vehicles for abject propaganda? And this is not denying that Star Wars was always kind of propaganda,
Mhm.
or that Star Trek
Yeah.
was essentially showing you what we were expected to believe would be the grand future we could have if we all just
Mhm.
got rid of private property. Because that's kind of
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I've always loved Star Trek, but it is progressive. It does play on certain themes. Well, that's also why I think Deep Space Nine was the greatest Star Trek
which
because
we will talk about in various streams with Odin
yes, we
at some
will.
point.
It's because it confronts a lot of these issues, these utopian notions in the Federation. It confronts the whole business of not having private property, not having money, not and because you have the Ferengi who have money and they need to so you have Nog teaching Jake Sisko about how hey self-interest and profit and how these motives can get things done. And there's the thing where they're doing all kinds of trades to in this one episode, actually an extremely well written episode. They got to get Cisco's desk back because they traded it to get certain
That
things they
episode
needed.
reminds me of video game side quests, actually, where you have to.
Right. But that's why that was a great run because it makes you challenge a lot of these ideas. And I love Next Generation, but Picard can get on these um, rants of liberal triumphalism sometimes that just drive me nuts.
Right.
Um,
DS
you know,
Nine's great strength was that it confronted the elephant in the room of Star Trek, which is this
Mhm.
claim that humans were not religious, which is just on its face nonsensical. And it showed that every other species out there had a religion. And then they very
Right.
gradually showed you that in fact humans still had religion. It was just that the imagine if China wasn't evil or right,
Yeah.
and they took over everything. That's the Federation basically.
Right.
Official state policy was to be atheistic,
Pretty much.
and there was a enormous missed opportunity, which would have been to have the religious, the very three representatives from a couple of the other religious religions from like that they highlighted in that show encounter a priest from Earth. Imagine an
Mhm.
Eastern Orthodox priest. Doesn't even have to be a Catholic priest, but imagine
Right.
a bishop of the like a patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church showing up on DS9. That would have been
Mhm.
fascinating, and they never went there.
They do go there on Babylon 5, interestingly enough, which was that was a grittier,
Now
show.
Babylon 5 is
That's
the one with
Utopia.
humans, right? Because I know there were
Yes.
Babylon 5 and Farscape were at the same time, and I'm always get the two confused.
Yeah, Babylon 5 was is about Earth, and Earth is almost destroyed by a cataclysmic by war with a much more advanced civilization, and then that
Mhm,
civilization just stops. The Minbari, they stop right when they're about to destroy Earth. Nobody knows why,
mhm.
and so they start moving on Earth to try to create some kind of UN in space, essentially.
Right, and so
But
Forgotten
the
Hollywood
idea
says
for
in the
the show was fantastic. They create the
Forgotten
space
Hollywood
station.
so in the chat, Forgotten Hollywood says that people say Star Trek is about not having money, but in the original series, Uhura nearly bought a triple. A man was selling them so he could afford drinks at the bar. And remember, Next
That's
Generation
true.
isn't that far off from the
Mhm.
original series on the timeline. There's a reason they
No.
called it the Next Generation. It wasn't that far away. So at
Mhm.
some point between the original series and Next Generation, they got rid of religion because the original series is full of references to God. It's got a bunch of them,
Right.
and not in a mythological way like they do in the original movies. And I love the original movies. Like
You're right.
movie Kirk is like my favorite captain.
Save
Jaded Kirk
for
with
Star Trek 5, but
well, Star Trek Five
that's the
is
only one I don't like.
Star Trek Five should have ended with them waking up from a nightmare in like in the sick bay with a fever, but
Dallas
um,
style, right?
and that would have made the
It's
whole movie better. It was a
but
fever dream.
and actually, and here's
But
one.
also they all got paid. There was an economy there, and sometime
Right.
in the intervening like 50 years that changes.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
remember what
that
people
would have
attributed to be? Was
been
it progressive because you had a Russian on the bridge?
right.
And
So
well,
that
it
would have
was
been
also
interesting to
egalitarian, more egalitarian because there was a black woman with a prominent role in the show.
right. Well, and so this from Forgotten Hollywood was never what people have attributed it to be. It was progressive because you had a Russian on the bridge. So, there's a view of it now, like James Kirk's a womanizer, right? When people talk about Kirk as just being this libertine Chad running around doing things, it's you can tell that person has never sat down and watched the original series. This person has never seen, let alone the movies, but especially even the original series. Yeah, there is some of that actually, and Kirk is easy with the women, but Kirk's he's an adult, he's a military man. This ship is his first concern. His crew is, and also the storytelling. The Enterprise herself is a character in the show, and it's really impressive how so many of these things come together. The writing is so very tight because they did not have big budgets to blow on CGI to hide the poor writing, like say Star Trek Discovery, which appropriately abbreviates to STD. The Kirk of original series and the Kirk of the movies is a responsible man, and the one in the movies, he's gone through this. You look at the Star Trek the motion picture. Kirk is an admiral. He's bored in his desk job. He wants to get back out in space, so he just uses an excuse of this thing coming toward Earth to get on the Enterprise, take it away from the captain who's got it. Now the captain who's got it, Dexter, he's running a decent ship. He knows where things are. Kirk comes in and he upsets everything. He doesn't know, and he has to confront that. I almost destroyed the Enterprise by doing something because I didn't understand how we've modified and changed things. Um, he has to sit and he sits down. He's talking to McCoy. Am I too old? Should I have gotten out here? Creates kind of this situation of doubt in Kirk, and he's got to kind of look back and what am I doing? Then in Star Trek 2, that theme continues, and McCoy convinces him to get over himself basically, and so he does, and he gets back out into space, and then you have the whole plot of Wrath of Khan, which is one of the most beloved Star Trek films.
Right.
Unfortunately, its success is bad for the series because then so many poor and impoverished writers keep trying to go back to the Khan storyline to pillage for other things.
Oh
But
yeah. So
of course, the shark stream turned into a Star Trek stream.
in the chat, Forgotten Hollywood gives us the counter argument. By the way, the counterfactual to the argument that he was a womanizer, because a womanizer often
Mhm.
you know their lusts control them, and well, he was clearly in control of himself most of
Right.
the time. Um, but
Compare
did the
that to
question
Twitter,
of
right?
but this goes
You
to our question:
know?
can Barbie have this effect on people? And the answer is, look at Star Trek. What effect did Star Trek have on people? Star Trek became idealized. Star Trek became this thing where people, you know, for good or for bad, honestly thought that that was our future, that that was where we were headed. Of course, not realizing that the road between reality, the road from the modern world to the Star Trek reality is so rocky you don't want to go there. But
Right.
um, it does have that effect on people. Star Trek fundamentally did change the way a lot of people think,
Mhm.
in some ways for good,
Yep.
but it also helped foster some utopian thinking. And now here
Right.
you have Barbie just painting this comic book like version of patriarchy for people,
Mhm.
and people believe it. That's why
Yeah.
I can't accept it as a satire, or at least an intentional
I
satire.
really didn't even recognize how he was perceiving it until he asked, "Are you crying?" 2 or 3 times throughout. Um, where's the money quote of it? Well, here's another tweet. "Did anyone watch Barbie and suddenly wanna break up with their boyfriend, or was that just me? Are you crying? You're just a guy, and you'll never understand how difficult it is to be a woman in a man's world. There's this attention to detail that a lot of men don't have."
Go
And
back to the,
I'm
and she's clearly taught referencing their America
yeah.
Ferrera's such cringe inducing rant at the
Mhm.
end of the movie. That the
Exactly.
media said her big speech at the end of the movie took 50 takes, and the people on set were weeping, you know, during all the shoots. I'll bet they were weeping for joy when it was over. I was laughing during her speech, laughing. I laughed a lot in that movie, but not at any of the parts they wanted you to laugh at, except maybe once.
Right.
And this is why it's hysterical to me that that there is a movement now being launched. You know, people trying to take Ken from the movie and basically make him an icon of the right.
Uh,
You know, he rebelled against the Longhouse, basically.
right. Yeah. Here's another quote. Barbie teaches us to empathize with other people as well as ourselves. If somebody is able to express how the movie made them feel rather than just surface level themes, it shows they can recognize their own feelings and communicate them. I'm scratching my so empathize with everyone except for men.
That's
Except
why
for,
that's why the men that's why the Kens started out essentially as homeless slaves and ended the movie as homeless slaves again.
yeah. It's yeah, there's the impassioned the monologue at the end. It's yeah.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
And it's I guess it's surprising to me at a certain level why or how this is able to do that. Because it's so obnoxious. So many of the themes in the movie are so obnoxious. But then I forget where we are as a culture. I'm on the march to 50. Most people are seeing this in 19. They've grown up with all the absurdity we've satirized. That kind of normal, the hyper emotive reaction to everything, not stopping to think, and I'm not even trying to play in the trope of women and emotions. I mean, just it's everybody at
Oh
this
yeah.
point in society. Um, and so, but
We're all guilty of it to a degree too.
mhm. Men, especially today, but even some of the guys who want to portray themselves as macho and on the far right, they emote quite a bit, which is, it's not a manly response. And the thing is that women naturally, are more emotional than men, but in women, that's actually a perfection when it's properly ordered. Because they need to be to raise young children, they need to be able to empathize, they need to be
It's
able
also
to
part of the complementarity between the
right.
sexes.
It
The
is,
less
and
emotional
so
man and the woman who is more in tune with that.
right. And so and the reason that the hyper emotional woman is the foil for so much satire and jokes and plays in history and in common sayings is because when that is out of order, um, when that's not, you know, playing right, and that becomes obnoxious. It causes more vices and problems. So now we have a society where everybody's basically trained to be, hyper emotional, hyper emotive,
Mhm.
and I mean even Ken and in the Kens they are emotional men.
Mhm.
in the movie, not rational and thoughtful men.
Except for
So
Alan. Alan, the one guy that people
yes,
say was a redeeming quality of the movie, who in the lore for Barbie that I only know because my wife, who has forgotten Hollywood in the chat on her channel, went over and pointed out that in the actual Barbie lore, Alan is married to Midge. Midge is the
oh,
pregnant Barbie they make fun of at the beginning of the movie. Alan is the father of her children, and there are no children in Barbie Land.
right,
I should put a light on that character.
indeed.
Yeah,
The
he's also the least emotional character in like the entire movie.
the other thing that kind of the meta narrative is um, the scene where all the girls are playing with dolls, and then you got this giant career Barbie show up like Space Odyssey, like the monolith in Space Odyssey 2001, and they start smashing their
Yeah,
dolls, their symbols of motherhood and family that you
and
aspire
I
to.
could see why people thought that was satire because it's like clearly like if you wanted to make that satire, you could have used that shot for shot, complete with the narration in a satire
Mhm.
movie as opening it to
Yeah,
point out that it's idolatry.
right. And it reminds me of your point on our last stream when Odin was here, where you said people are trying to say this movie is misandry. It's actually not. It's misanthropic.
Mhm.
It's anti-human more than it is just anti-men, because you can't have healthy functioning societies where the relationship between men and women are so destroyed in this way, and you know
If
the
our
hyperfeminism.
culture is so sick with a sort of underlying misanthropy that is fueled by broken political ideology of pure license that we are all headed towards what Japan is now.
Right.
Japan is what's awaiting us. If you don't know what I mean by that, Japan is a country that is on the verge of remilitarizing itself, which I think is actually a good thing, given the things
Mhm.
going on
Right.
geopolitically in their neighborhood. But they are facing the specter of having to let outsiders into their country
Hmm.
because they are not having children.
Yeah. More
And
adult diapers sold in Japan than baby diapers at this point, and
yes, and
and it's
it's because of indecent, impure films.
mhm,
Japan is notorious for this.
mhm,
Another country, the super based Russia, is also
right.
notorious for this. By the way,
Oh yeah.
both of them are huge exporters of that junk,
Hmm.
and it's to the point where that president, their conservative president they had recently, the one that he got taken out by
Shinzo Abe.
somebody. Yeah,
Yeah.
his platform is please go out and have babies.
Hmm. And that's like far right. You can't do that. You can't tell people to have
To go do
kids
what
or once
everybody
you
did
have
for all of human history. That the
yeah,
whole reason we're here is because people did that.
exactly.
So yeah, that is the effect of things like the Barbie movie. Now, that's not saying that that Barbie movie will do it by itself. Obviously, that movie
Right.
isn't having the cultural cachet it had out of pure isolation. It wasn't like some divine lightning bolt came down and suddenly shook the culture. The people who have made this movie a $1 billion movie did it because they already believed that stuff and they maybe
Hmm.
just didn't know it. They never thought it,
Right.
put the stuff together. Whereas the rest of us who just laughed at the movie because it was so on the nose that it became self satirical, we're generally the ones who understand the consequences of this stuff and recognize it's already been there. If you've
Right.
gone to college, you know that if you come out against it, you are in trouble. You will be and find yourself in
Yeah.
deep trouble very quickly. A lot of young men know that college is not a place to meet your wife anymore, that you can't
No.
have anything other than cordial, neutral, no physical contact relations of any kind with a member of the opposite sex anymore, because otherwise you could find yourself in an administrative hearing accused of some horrible misdeed that will follow you for the rest of your life.
Precisely.
It's a horrible situation. And note the age of the woman in that tweet. She was 22 years old,
Mhm.
college age.
Yep.
This is why Odin in his live streams, whenever he's talking about the updates for Barbie, always talks about how he fears for the future.
Yes. No, I think so, especially with the its continuing success, and that people are seeing it. You see like tweets where women have seen it 2 or 3 times, and that to me anyway, I think tells us where. I mean, and like you said, I think that it's a good juxtaposition of Sound of Freedom on the one side, and how people got behind the cause that is that movie,
Mhm.
and it propelled an indie movie that's doing far better than it had any right to do.
Oh,
And then on the other
enormously better, especially when you consider the fact that to break even, Angel Studios only needed to make $5 million on it, not 15.
right.
15, and it's also not an indie movie. It was made by Fox.
Well, that's
Okay,
true. Yeah, that's right.
it was made by
And
Fox,
so
not by Angel
in terms of
Studios. It's
its
just
distribution, it's an indie movie, but in
yeah,
terms, yeah, in the production, and so you look at that, but then on the flip side, then we look at Barbie, which I mean, there's a couple of different things going on with the movie's success. Barbenheimer, coming out at the same time as Oppenheimer, which even though they're completely different in every possible way, as a biopic versus the this misanthropic, narcissistic, feminist fest that is Barbie, but also the the fact that it's doing as well as it's doing, because it has certain things that don't play well for a lot of films. There's a bait and switch. It's portrayed as fun for the whole family. They're portraying it as something you can enjoy with your kids who enjoy Barbies, and then you actually, that thing actually comes out, and it turns out it's this third wave feminist love fest
mhm.
of narcissistic self-indulgence, and yet the word of mouth, people are still seeing it.
They are
um
still are. My hope is that with school starting this coming week, that finally its box office is going to drop off.
yeah, I
Not
hope so anyway, but
because
yeah,
it's because I mean
there's
we
no
went
denying it's killed it in the financially.
when my wife and I went to see the Meg. I couldn't help but notice all the people wearing pink who were going to see Barbie that weekend.
Right.
It's a scary, scary thing.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
should be.
so
What a horrible
uh,
note to end on. Our shark stream,
well,
which
no,
became
no,
the
no.
Star Trek stream, which became a dystopia.
Well, no, think of it this way: we haven't heard the end of Barbenheimer.
No, we haven't.
People are talking about Barbie as getting it nominated for awards, even though that is on its face just would reveal that the Oscars are a complete joke. But don't put it past them; they probably will nominate it for Best Picture. But so will Oppenheimer. And so they will nominate both of them,
Right.
if for no other reason than to bring back the Barbenheimer meme to drive people to watch the Oscars. So when they do that, not
Mm-hmm.
if, when, don't give that to them. The memes are fine, the memes are fun, but don't tune in. The Oscars are one of those things that need to die. They need to
Yes.
die. And they needed to die not only when they started, using it as their preachy politics thing, because for 30 years they've been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to die when they made the best picture category uh, put a basically a DEI sort of requirement on it.
Mm-hmm.
When they did that, it needed to die.
Yes.
The whole thing.
And it says something too, that all of a sudden the viewership tunes in when the slap happens. The slap heard around the world.
Right. That's why some people think the whole thing was staged.
Yeah, and actually we had Bug Hall on, who's a former actor on the Rundown. When that happened, and he and I both agree that it wasn't staged. This is something that's just it erupted from uh, Will Smith's very disastrous open-ended marriage with a very obnoxious woman.
Right. That was his. That was his subconscious bubbling to the surface.
Right, but and be that as it may, but you're right, and of course you look at what they do as well. They have what do you get? You get a golden idol, basically, um, as your award.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, the end note to end on is you haven't seen the end of Barbenheimer.